As a leader, I'm sure that you've had this experience, right? You feel like it's time to make a change as an organization, and you've involved people in the decision, and you are ready to see this change happen. And as soon as you begin to initiate change in your organization, you realize that there is a person or a group of people who don't think this change is necessary, and they are resistant to the change. I mean, you can just read it on their face. You can see it from the get-go. This is not what they think we need to be doing. They may not say anything, but it's present, and you feel it in the room. What I want us to talk about, what are some reasons why people resist change in organizations? I want to share with you some ways to recognize that change, and then also talk through some ways that we can overcome that resistance to change that people have. And so I think we first have to begin with just understanding some reasons why people resist change. And there's 4 primary reasons I believe people resist change in organizations. Now, I'm sure there's more than that, but there are 4 primary ones that I've been a part of, that I've seen happen in organizations that I've been a part of and have led. One of those is they have a self-interest. So you share about a change that's about to happen, and they immediately think about, how does this change impact me? And so they're hearing these changes that are about to occur, and they can't help but think about how this change is going to impact their job. How's it going to impact their life? How's it going to impact their travel schedule? How's it going to impact their to-do list? How's it going to impact all the things that they're already doing? How does this change impact them? They're unable at that moment to see the big picture that you've been looking at as the leader, and they are only able to see it through their lens. That does not make them a bad person. It makes them actually pretty human. So as we begin to share change with our team and begin to talk about change, we have to know that one of the reasons why people are going to be resistant to the change is that they see it differently. They're going to see it from their own self-interest. Secondly, they have a fear of failure. Maybe they've been really successful in their current work, and this new change that's being implemented in the organization is something brand new to them. They used to do this, and now they're going to do that. And what if I can't do that as well as I used to do what I did before? And they're worried that they're going to fail. And because they're worried they're going to fail, they're worried they may lose their job. And now all of a sudden, this change that you're excited about as a leader, they're resisting that change because they have a fear of failure in the new role that they're going to be asked to do, or the new thing, the new responsibilities and such that they're going to be asked to do. So there could be a self-interest issue, not able to see the big picture. They're only worried about what's going to impact them. They have a fear of failure. But the third reason why people resist change in organizations is they have a lack of trust. In other words, they've gone through this before in a previous work environment and it didn't go well. And now they're thinking you as the leader are not prepared to lead the organization through the kind of change that you want them to, that you've told them you're going to lead them through. And they just don't trust leaders right now. And so because of that, they're going to be resistant to the change. But the fourth area that is the reason why people resist change is they have a real different assessment. In other words, you and the leadership team think we need to be doing this, and then they think we need to be doing this. And they just assess the situation differently. They just see it completely different. And because they see it differently and have a different assessment of what's going on, whether it's right or you're right, they see it differently, they're going to resist the change that you're asking them to make. So understanding that these are 4 reasons why people could resist change can help you as you begin to initiate that change in an organization. Well, let me give you 3 ways you can recognize there's a resistance to change. Not every form of resistance is going to show up with somebody raising their hand or maybe frowning or maybe coming and talking to you. Those would be okay if they would come to talk to you, but sometimes they're resisting the change for these reasons or other reasons, and you may not know because they didn't come to tell you. Here's 3 things that could be existing. One is you may have a high performer who turns into a poor performer. They were your all-star, but now this change has taken place. They don't think the change needed to be made for whatever reason, whether it's self-interest or failure or lack of trust or different assessment. They just didn't agree with it, and now their performance went from a all-star performance to they're just barely getting their work done. That's a red flag that maybe this change is, there's something that needs to be talked about. The second area that'll help you recognize it is these resistant groups start to pop up. And it sometimes shows up like this. A couple of people that maybe eat lunch together, or maybe exercise together, or go on walks together, whatever it may be. They begin conversations like, well, if I was the leader, I would do it this way. And then somebody says, well, yeah, that's the way I would do it too. In fact, the way that they're doing it is not right. Yeah, I would agree. And all of a sudden, you're sitting in meetings and you begin to realize these group of people tend to always answer the same way. And you begin to see that there's some resistance groups that are forming. That's important for you as a leader, because then you can sit down and just ask those groups, what exactly is going on here as it relates to the change that we're trying to make as an organization. And then the third way you can recognize resistance to change is there's a change in work patterns and support. The employee and the teammate that was generally very energetic and saying, man, I really appreciate all that you do for us, or thank you for the way you're leading us, and hey, I'll do whatever I can to help you, their support is no longer there. It was there for 5 years, and now all of a sudden it's gone, and their work patterns look really different. And in some cases, they're kind of quietly quitting their role. When you see these things in your organization as you're initiating different change, they can be a red flag, a warning sign, if you will, that there's some resistance going on to the change that you're trying to make. Well then, if that's the case, how do you overcome it? How do you overcome change? Well, one is leaders must be honest and provide frequent communication throughout the organization about the change and explain its purposes. So we're going to be honest about the change, and then we're going to provide communication all the time. I was a part of an organization one time, and we had a major 700 or so employees in this particular division of the organization. And I remember there were so many different, kind of rumors circulating amongst the organization about what's really going on. Or we were told we were going to have to reapply for our jobs, and there were people upset about that. And you can imagine it was a reshuffle, and every position was eliminated, and we all were to reapply for a different position. And one of the things that helped in that moment that felt pretty confusing and unsettling was that the leadership tried their very best to give us frequent communication about what's happening and what was happening next. And that helped as we went about this change process. The second way to overcome the resistance to change is that there needs to be as much involvement in the change as possible. Involving as many people as possible. It helps get the right information to the team that's being asked to change. Now, if it's a small organization, that'll be easy to do. If it's a larger organization, like what I was sharing, it's a little more complicated to involve people and when to know when to involve them and when not to. But if it's done by just a few people in a large organization, it can almost cause a backfire to happen where there's trust just is not extended. But then third, we have to provide training that will help people learn why the change was necessary in the first place. The change that I mentioned about this organization that was reshuffling 750 people, one of the things that I look back now over 20 years later and say, I don't know that we all understood why we were even making such a wholesale change and shift in the organization. In fact, it really wasn't very clear. Well, it's hard to overcome the resistance amongst a team when it's just really not clear why we're doing this in the first place. So as leaders, we got to provide training, provide opportunities to continue to tell people this is the reason why we're doing it. We were here, we're trying to go here because we think this is what's best for the organization, and we give them a really solid plan to help them understand why that change was actually necessary. Whether we want to admit it or not, people in our organization are going to be asking the question, why are we doing that anyway? If we can answer that question clear and honest, it can help them overcome this resistance that they're feeling to change. Well, I wish I could tell you that change happens easily, but it rarely does. Not wanting to be the bearer of bad news, but just to be honest, change very seldom happens easily. But it can be a real wholesome experience when it's done right. In organizations that are unwilling to change, we know that oftentimes doesn't have a good outcome. It's a necessary part of leadership. Every leader, to be effective, must be able to initiate change in a way that doesn't hinder the progress of the organization, but that excites the people about the future. Leading change can be so much fun, but we got to be able to recognize when people are resisting it. We got to help them overcome that resistance as we initiate change in our organizations.